So this is John Ortberg. I'm here with my friend Doug Turner, and we're talking about, for a church, how do you move from dream, language about the great thing that God wants to do with our church to actual action? And how do we do this in a way that will actually mobilize the church? A lot of times we'll talk about something in ways that might sound really cool, but people aren't sure what to do next. And so, Doug, you talked about that notion of a campaign being really critical. A campaign can be very cool because it's time limited, so we can actually get to the finish line. It's actually designed to involve everybody, so people get out of the bleachers, onto the field. It's a way of structuring systems to align folks. But a lot of us who've been around churches a bit, we hear campaign and we think, oh, that's just a way to raise money if you're going to build a new sanctuary. Churches used to do that like once every 50 years. But what you're talking about is actually much more flexible and kind of much more contemporary than that and what you're learning. So say a bit about what a campaign really is and how useful it can be.
Yeah, I think campaigns become these energizing moments in the life of a church because it deeply connects people to your vision moving forward. It certainly doesn't have to be simply big buildings that need to be built and humongous kinds of financial goals that are out there.
Or giant salaries for the senior pastor.
That could work too. But the other thing would be simply this, that how do you mobilize people in ministry initiative? What does it look like to get people sort of off the bench into the game and connect to ministry? And resource ministry. So in some of the churches I've worked with, whether it's Redeemer Presbyterian in New York, where every campaign they do has some sort of capital need around a building, but it also has this ministry initiative and sort of a bold initiative that they want to fund in a very unique way and mobilize people in a very unique way. So campaigns ultimately have some steps to them. One is, first of all, you've got to create a climate of understanding. People tend to be negative about that which they don't know or don't understand. We just make negative conclusions out of that. So, like the pastor's salary or something, I might make a negative conclusion out of that. So the bottom line is, how do we look at it from the point of view of having understanding? It's not just head knowledge, but what does it mean for the heart to be connected to this? And then you create alignment of resources, whether that's time, talent, or treasure. How do we align resources to move forward? And ultimately, that might mean some of your key leaders and early adopters are really coming into play and helping you create that sort of conversation moving forward with other people. And then to engage people spiritually. At the end of a process like this isn't about coercion. This isn't about guilt. This isn't about sort of making people feel like, they're going to be put in the corner if they don't do something. This is about really discovering what God's doing in your life and that God-sized opportunity that moves you forward with great energy and joy in life. And that's the call to action that we come to at the end of a campaign.
Well, and what I like about it is it's an opportunity to address the spiritual life of every individual in the church.
Yeah.
In this book that I wrote, All the Places to Go, it gets into this whole idea of open doors. And people tend to have different styles when it comes to how do they respond to opportunities, which is what that open door image really looks at. Some people tend to be impulsive, and you look at the Apostle Peter, like he sees Jesus out of the boat, I'm getting out of the boat. There's a threat in the garden, I'll get my sword off. He may not be real skillful with it, so with the impulsive types, a lot of times they need direction, they need skills, they need training. But they bring energy.
Yeah.
And then there'll be other people that are naturally resistors. They like to play it safe. The patron saint of resisting open doors in the Bible, I think, is Jonah. God comes, I want you to preach at Nineveh. I would not go there in a goat. I would not go there in a boat. I would not go there in a gale. I would not go there in a whale. He's like, I just don't want to go there. And Doug, I remember something you said to me years ago as we're doing a campaign and calling for involvement. There'll be a certain kind of person that will often pose reservations or ask difficult questions. And you said, don't get discouraged by that. That's a person that's actually thinking about going through the open door. And that's the reason that they're asking questions or posing reservations. A lot of times it's the person that doesn't ask anything or doesn't note any difficulties that's really in a harder place because they're apathetic.
Yeah.
And it's that apathetic response that's even harder than the resistor or the impulsive. But for all of them, the invitation to go through the open door is a journey that they can do individually that then will be part of the journey for the whole church.
Yeah, and I think, John, what's so good about that is that if pastors learn that people in your church sort of come in those kinds of motivational categories, if you will. No one's any one thing or the other, but we sort of tend to move from a certain place. So when I was reading your book, it reminded me that there's a ministry model that I talk about that I call the guardian model. And that's the person that they value protection. They value sort of the legacy, and they value protecting the culture of the church, and they value sort of protecting truth and those kinds of things.
But they also could be the resistor.
They are they can move towards the resistor when they're struggling with things. Very process oriented, typically. So you might give them vision. They need vision, but they also want to see, well, how do I get there? Show me some steps to get there. And so they process it that way. To use a football analogy, they play defense. They have a tendency, their greatest fear is, what can I lose? Out of what I already have. On the other hand, the impulsive sort of comes out of a group that I sort of call the entrepreneurial ministry group. And these are the folks that they love the opportunity. They love risk over security. They'll jump out of the boat. They are the Peters. And in the football analogy, they play offense. And their greatest fear is they're going to miss an opportunity. They're going to miss something that we should have done, and it's behind us now. So you need to recognize as a pastor, you have both of those groups in your church and communicate something that appeals to both of them. And my sense has been this too, that oftentimes the entrepreneurial folks in our churches, they don't want a job at the church or a task at the church. They want someone to sort of speak into their gifts and give them some freedom to go out and discover something that God has created them for.
And that's what we have been working on. And in the next time together, we'll tell you more about, like, if you're interested in that, if you think God might have an open door for your church, and you love to have a new season of realizing that dream together, what's the next step you can take?
Perfect.